All right. So, what we're going to address here is more. Let me move this around a little bit here. More of the strategies that are going to help with and simplify it as much as possible. The fat loss phase, and when we talk about the fat loss phase, it doesn't have to be forever. And we don't want it to be forever because it feels sometimes it feels daunting and restricting, and we try to give you guys all the tools and things to make sure it's as easy as possible. And these are some of the strategies that Aaron may have set up with you. There's a lot of different ways to get from point A to point B, depending on the client, depending on personalities and things of that nature. We may set up different nutritional coaching plans for different individuals, and some of them are more simple than others, and that's okay. Some people like to track all those components and track the macros, and there is there's some validity to that. Scaling out foods, there's validity to that as well. But you don't always have to do that. What we try to do is teach you concepts that will make it simple as possible. And the cool part is we're getting ready to bring some technology in to simplify the meal tracking component, which is going to be awesome. So it'll allow you guys to take a picture of the food. It'll give you a breakdown of the food, and you press one button, and it'll upload that food into your app, into your macro breakdown. So it's going to be great for you guys to simplify and make it a lot quicker. So we're excited about that. So hopefully we get that up and running here soon. But what we're going to dive into is some of the concepts that what you should be aware of in the fat loss phase, and in simple things that we want to make sure that we address through that process. So first of all, the foundational of fat loss is calorie control. It does require some type of calorie deficit. The reason we don't put you in a heavy caloric restriction, because you can do it, but there's too many negative aspects around it. Specifically, when you put somebody in a heavy caloric deficit, there's hormonal issues that go on, there's disruption that goes on, there's insulin problems that go on. So it's not the best strategy for long-term success. So we want to make sure that when we push you into a fat loss phase, it's going to be sustainable and you're going to be able to tolerate it, because we want to make sure that you feel like you have control over it. And we want to make sure that we don't have the hard restrictions that can cause some other problems long term with metabolism, hormonal response, and stressors on the thyroid and things of that nature. So that's why we use some of these tools, and that's why I'll explain like our foundational component. Some people come into us and their foundation is pretty solid, so we can kick them right into maybe a fat loss phase right off. Some people we want to try to address some of the components of the foundational phase, because if you overlook the foundation, a lot of times what will happen, it's going to be a weak foundation, or the foundation will crumble. The concepts of the foundation are so simple, but they're so important for individuals to master and make part of their habits. What I'm talking about is stress management. How do you manage stress? What does that look like from your central nervous system? Movement, general movement is good. We don't always have to go, hard and high intensity. Specifically, when we're in some fat loss phases, it makes it harder to stay in calorie restriction, because what you're doing is you're putting another stressor on the body if you do like high intensity type cardio activity. So movement is good for you. Sleep is one of the foundational components. Are you getting your water in? So that's why we set up these foundational components, because a lot of times everybody wants to go directly to the workouts and directly to the end result without getting the foundation solid. And that's why some people will ask us, okay, am I in this phase or that phase? Well, it kind of depends on the individual, but when you even start into the program, we're going to set you up in a calorie deficit regardless. Now, if somebody's ready to jump into the workouts and jump into all the other components fairly quickly, we'll push them into that. So always never hesitate to ask some of those questions, because I think they're great questions. Uh, but we also want to make sure you have your foundation solid. Another component with that, we go right into it. You're going to hear me talk about it. It's like beating a dead horse, protein intake. It's going to be the most important nutrient in fat loss. And it's going to be the one that helps you accomplish that the quickest. So high protein is going to preserve the muscle and boost your metabolic process. It's going to stabilize your insulin. It's going to tamp down the hunger response. All those components. You guys heard me talk about that. So getting you more accustomed to consuming protein or thinking about protein, it does take some time and effort to address those situations and make them part of what you do now and change some of the habits that maybe you had prior to coming to us. The other thing we overlook sometimes, you'll hear us talk about this. This is something that we could probably go a little bit deeper into, and that is food quality. Because unfortunately, the quality of food has suffered, I don't know, over these last 10 to 12 years. And it's become easier to get less quality food, and it's cheaper to get less quality food, which is unfortunate. It used to be the flip side, the convenience and stuff you used to have to pay extra for, and the higher quality food was probably at a better price point. But they're doing a better job to address some of these situations. You want to look for nutrient dense foods, whole foods as much as possible, because it's going to help with, again, controlling insulin response, controlling the cravings. The other components is the nutrient value in it. A lot of times, the quality of food, it takes longer to break down, which is a good thing. It's going to give you more nutrients and more energy, and it's not going to give you because some of the foods we consume, they put some of the chemicals that we get addicted to, hence sugars and salts, and other chemicals. I would have to go do a little bit more research to help, go down that rabbit hole. But what happens with some of the processed foods, it's higher in some of those components, sugars and fats, or sugars and salts, and it could have some omega sixes. I think it has a lot more omega sixes, which are not necessarily good for you. What we do is when we consume those foods, we want to come back and eat them again and again and again. They purposely have made food like that, so you keep coming back. I get it. And then the fourth component is consistency. It's not all about you heard me talk about this. It's not all about perfection. It's about stacking small wins daily and keeping the needle moving forward. And when you get 5, 6, 7 days, and then you can stack another week on that, man, you have so much momentum. And that's going to give you, it's going to feel like, hey, everything is going in the right direction when you could stack multiple wins, even though you don't have to be perfect with that. And then going back to the protein as the anchor, it is going to be the anchor for your fat loss journey. Daily targets, I put a little bit higher. I know Aaron sets it up specifically because you can't just start if you haven't been consuming a lot of protein. We're not going to expect you to hit a specific number over 100 grams right off. It takes work and practice just like anything else. So I have it higher because you can push higher depending on where you're at. Some of the guys I work with are up into that 2 gram per body weight. It just depends on where they're at and how much stress. Because one thing we forget about and we don't address, and they don't address it from a science standpoint very often, you'll hear some practitioners talk about this. If you're in a more stressful situation on a daily basis, you're going to need a little bit more protein. And another thing that they're getting better at addressing this is protein turnover. As we age, we don't utilize it as efficiently, so we may need more protein access. So we utilize it as we get past 40. So it's going to help preserve that lean tissue, increase obviously the sensation of being full, the craving response, and then there's a thermal effect. So it takes more calories and more energy sources to break down your protein in comparison to other foods. You guys know the sources, and it could be a variety. I was having a conversation yesterday. A gentleman's been in my program for about a month, and he was like, it was time for me to switch up the food. And I was like, 100%. Choose what proteins that you may enjoy and rotate them. So he did. So this week he started with some turkey instead of chicken. And I said, that's 100% correct. Just go down through that list and pick and choose. it doesn't always have to be the same source of protein, but I will say we get pretty accustomed to consuming similar, in variances and moving through, different recipes that will work for you. So don't always feel like you have to consume the same type of protein, and you can maneuver that from whatever really fits your palate. So don't feel like you're stuck that way, and it gives you some flexibility. To the carbohydrates. So let's talk a little bit about carbohydrates. Um, and the cool part about this new software that we're bringing in, we may be able to manipulate non-lifting days and lifting days with calories, but we have to play around with that software. I think it's very important, but that's going to be really specific to individual. So big picture, what I'm saying is certain days we may allow you to have a little bit more calories based upon your workout and load and what you're doing from the gym aspect. And then days that you just get your 10,000 steps, what we can do, because your hunger response is not going to be as high. Anytime you do resistance training, your metabolic process goes up. So your hunger, it's going to kick your hunger up somewhat. And if we can push your calories up to enough to tamper that down, but still stay in somewhat deficit, and then the next day, maybe you can tolerate being in a little bit more caloric deficit. Well, it's just going to compound over the week. But we have to play around with that technology individually. But talking about carbs, carbs are not the devil. They're not evil. They are an energy source, muscle contraction, muscle glycogen. For your workouts, you need carbohydrates. So the target's going to be, and this is kind of random, so 25 to 35% of total intake. That's really specific to individual. So don't take this for what you should be personally doing because we would set that up specifically. That's going to vary depending on where the person's at in their fat loss journey or lifting days, non-lifting days. So sometimes when you're lifting days, the calories, the way you push your calories up a little bit higher, may be a carbohydrate source because we use carbohydrates for muscle contraction. So we're gonna tap into those stores. So there's just ways to again manipulate your nutrition to make sure that we're fueling you, but what we're doing is we're setting your body up for success for fat loss. And this is 100% some of the science components stripped down to basic strategies. Again, the sources of carbohydrates going to matter. Obviously, trying to get more nutrient dense carbohydrates as well. Sweet potatoes, rice, oats, and you can go through and choose. And I'm sure you have some of your favorites, but we want to make sure that we're not consuming. And I think I have it here in the presentation, things that are going to spike the insulin too hard. Um, so having carbohydrates going to help with fuel the workouts, preserving training intensity. And Aaron and I just got my blood work back and some of the recommendations. So I'm still having a little bit of thyroid issue, and I'm hopefully that they got my antibodies lined out. But one of the recommendations was to pull me back out of fasting during my workouts, which I started on Monday. I had a shake because it's another stressor on the thyroid. That by consuming carbohydrate, it's going to pull down that stressor instead of going into a fasting state in the energy systems that I have to use during my workout. It was just quite interesting feedback for myself. The interesting part with me, I'm pretty lean. I'm around 6% body fat, so I don't really need to be doing a fasting workout. But Aaron and I just went through that process. His last 6 to 8 months, we really got focused on dropping that percentage of body fat, and we just got stuck in that routine of doing fasting workouts. So what I'm going to do is start pulling myself back out of that, uh, just to take some of the stress off the issues I personally have going on with my thyroid, and to seeing if I can manipulate my nutrition to help balance my internal workings and the stressors on my body. So the way you use carbohydrates can be important, can be really specific to individual. And then, we always get this question about fats. Oh, I consume my fat content's too high. Again, we're probably going to say the same thing. We're not necessarily worried about your fat content because anytime, and I think I've said this a couple of times. Anytime you increase your protein, your fat content's going to go up. It's going to match it, and not match it, but it's going to be pretty similar. Once you start pushing the grams of protein up, your percentage of body or your percentage of fat intake goes up with it. There's just no way around it because it goes together. But the sources, the avocados, olive oils, nut seeds, fatty fish, they're all going to be really good for hormonal support. Even with myself and with having my testosterone low in the beginning of this process of when we went through this blood work and stuff, they gave me specific supplementation, and consuming more fat was part of it because it's going to help my hormonal balance. So another thing that people don't understand or don't or kind of forget about is when you consume more fat, it gives you the sensation of being full longer as well, just like protein will. So, and it's going to aid in nutritional absorption. So all those are going to be really benefits. And then again, controlling the hunger response is so crucial, specifically when you're in a calorie deficit. And then the other thing, and I think Aaron's probably had some of the ladies ask about this more than I had the guys. I will get them to consume more fiber if I can. I like to have them consume it through the fibrous carbohydrates if they can. So pushing fiber up is going to be important. It helps stabilize blood sugar. It's going to help with the digestion process. It slows down that process a little bit. So it gives the nutrients a chance to break down, cleans out the system. There's just a bunch of good research around increasing fiber. So you can get it through your carbohydrates, so your vegetables, fruits, depending on what you choose, more fibrous carbohydrates from that standpoint. So it's going to promote all those components, fullness, stabilize blood sugar, all the benefits. Again, when you take all these pieces and start putting these pieces together, we're just setting you up for success with making sure your body is utilizing the fat stores it has. So it starts burning the fat that you've already stored, and we maintain and stoke the metabolism in lean tissue. We try to build that lean tissue up a little bit. We try to get your metabolic process up. The things that we really want to be aware of when we're in this phase is processed foods. Processed foods are going to slow everything down, and they can slow everything down, specifically ultra processed. You don't necessarily have to like throw everything out, but you do have to be aware of how much you're consuming in the ultra processed because it can really mess with your insulin response. A lot of times the nutrient dense component's not there, but sometimes the calorie dense density is there. What I'm saying there is it's high in calories, but you're not getting the nutrient value out of it because they stripped it down and they filled it with other chemicals to replace some of the nutrient dense, or if it's even real food. That's another question. Um, Liquid calories, you got to watch those. Those will sneak up on you really quick. So any type of drink, coffee that has latte this or that, or it just adds up really quick. And then any type of soda or things of that nature. Just be very aware because man, I a gentleman I'm working with. He's been on my program for a couple weeks. He was drinking like two or three sodas a day. So we had to, and he knew it. So we had to address that. From a health standpoint, it's not great. It's just not healthy for you at all. But then it's a calorie component. And then fried foods. We want to try to minimize fried foods. So not off limits, but should be, the flexible component. So if you're consuming less of these things, you're going to set yourself up in a better position. The other thing that's overlooked a lot of times when you're in this fat loss phase, and again, we coach this in the foundational phase, is the hydration. Hydration is so important because it helps the system function. It's going to help with your metabolic response, cravings, recovery, getting, everything moving. So we just take for granted a lot of times that a lot of people get dehydrated because they're not consuming enough water. And once you start consuming water on a consistent basis and get up to a certain level, you will start being more aware of when you start to feel some of the dehydration kick in. What I'm saying there, even like what Aaron and I do now from a coaching, we used to coach a lot, obviously face to face. Same concept. We would always have, obviously, you know, our water bottles with us because you could extremely dehydrate yourself fairly quickly if you do a lot of communication. So if you're running webinars, if you're on the phone, have a lot of communication during the day, well, you will push into dehydration fairly quickly, faster than you think. So having water there to consume, what you'll notice once you get to a certain level and you're used to having the water, you'll start feeling a little bit lethargic. You'll start feeling a little bit tired, or you may feel hungry. First thing you probably want to do is push your water intake up first and see if that doesn't address all those situations. Because a lot of times that's just indicator of where we're not consuming enough water or the lack, or we've whatever we're doing. If we're communicating a lot, we're burning a lot of it off. So you just want to be intentional with that. Meal timing. Again, this depends on individual schedule, but meal timing, structured 3 to 4 meals, obviously built with protein. Uh, you know, I just talked about this, pre-workout protein and carb. That's going to be for me personally now. I'm going to shift into that. Sometimes people are okay with not consuming anything before the workout. Some people have to. I've been on both sides of that puzzle, um, where I was having some hypoglycemia responses when I was working out, and I was able to, with fasting, it seemed like it stabilized my insulin response better. But I've been through that as well, where I had to eat prior to, and then finally I was able to train my body where I didn't have to consume prior to. So there's just different concepts there. Now, recommendation for you guys, and again, this will go back to your coach. If you feel like you struggle during the workout, you can always add an electrolyte and or a essential amino acid in your drink during the workout, and that will give you a little bit of carbohydrate during the workout. So there's always like tricks and things you can do to just help. You just want to make sure that that just doesn't push your calories too high. So whatever you're consuming, you just don't want it to be too high and push you off your calorie mark. So post-workout protein carb, you know, um, a long time ago, this industry, reverses on itself. But I used to make our staff read a nutrient timing book, which I think they debunked all the science that came out of that research. But anyway, um, I think the biggest thing with that is post-workout, if you can get a good source of protein carb in, timing's not necessarily going to affect you. Um, just a matter of making sure that first meal you do have a good amount of protein. That way you're setting yourself up for success with your protein goals. It's not going to necessarily affect the response or the result. So don't get caught up with that too much. Um, At evening, making sure you're having a protein, veggie, healthy fat for your dinner. If you get those three combinations, because you're looking at if you can get your protein, your veggie is going to be fiber, so you're pushing up your fiber content, and then your healthy fat. All those things are going to help with, again, setting yourself up for success. Now, I had this question the other day as well, is we have a lot of people monitoring their sleep because sleep's important. And you guys may want to, if you're tracking your sleep, pay attention to this. When do you stop eating? When do you go to bed? And then monitor how your sleep is based upon what your last meal was. Because it can give you some feedback. Sometimes what we're seeing is if somebody eats too close to when they start winding down to go to sleep, they're having some disruption in their sleep patterns. Another it was a course that I had taken on sleep. If you're struggling with some of your deep sleep or waking up uh, throughout the night, you may want to take a simple carbohydrate in 30 minutes before you go to sleep and test it. Because what they were saying and seeing is if your insulin response drops in the middle of the night, it's going to wake you up out of your deep sleep. Those are just, again, that's fine tuning, but you got to be very, very aware and very track heavy if you go into that realm with your sleep and stuff and nutrition. But there's just different strategies and things you can do winding down for the end of the night. These are examples. Just, obviously we give you different templates and things to go after. Again, if you can get breakfast, this is an example of, five egg whites plus two whole eggs, spinach, oat with berries. Covers it all. You'd be full, right? Aaron doesn't even touch that. That's more like me. But anyway, again, these are examples. It's not going to correlate necessarily with your specific portion size. Lunch, 6 ounce chicken. Obviously, we address the carbs, the fiber, the fat. Again, some of you guys do snacks, some of you do not. I have some of my guys utilize the snacking just to get them through time frames. So that's going to be depending on an individual. Again, Greek yogurt is a main component we consume, and then again, dinner is going to address all the components, having a well-rounded, whole, nutrient-dense meal. And this is a good one. So, food is a fuel. It's going to help you perform at a higher level. It's not a punishment. It's just a perspective of how you view nutrition. Uh, Again, the fat loss phase is temporary. We don't want this to drag on, because once we get you into a certain ranges, we have a lot more flexibility. What I'm saying there is you don't have to be as strict, but you do have to, obviously monitor your week to week. You don't want to revert back to the habits you had prior. And ideally you become a different individual in the process where those habits you used to have that got you to the area that you didn't want to be, now you've changed and those habits are new habits and you'll keep that weight off and you'll keep in those ranges. But you have more flexibility with how many calories you can consume. Just flexibility in the types of food you eat once you get closer or down to the marker that's good for you. It's just easier to, once you get there, it's just easier to maintain. Um, Specifically, once we get that resistance training locked in with you, because it's going to help boost your metabolic process. And then you have all those foundational components in place and it just compounds. So, consistency with obviously high protein, whole foods is always going to win. And you're going to have some flexibility. It does, again, I'll say 80%. If you get up in those ranges, the needle's going to move in the right direction for you. So, so again, the action steps, and you guys may be working on these components. You want to build the meals around protein. You want to make sure that water consumption is, and then the 20 or 80/20 concept. So you want to focus on getting up to that 80% and hitting those marker points. So I know some of you guys are in this phase, some of you are going into this phase. It's a phase where you want to really focus on some of these concepts and make sure that these concepts are consistent, and consistent on a 7 day standpoint, a 14-day standpoint. So if you can stack a whole month, just think how far that needle is going to move for you. And that's where we see most of the problems is a person can stack a 7 to 14 day and then they start falling back into some of the things or something happens or they have a social component they didn't do so well at. But again, what we're going to say is, hey, as long as we break even on that, we come back on the other side, we need to stack another 7 to 14 days. And again, the needle's going to move. So what may happen is it'll go down, flat line, down, flat line, down. So it may not always go down, down, down. Now we've seen that happen with people, and some people can do that. That they're able to just really focus and set themselves up and their environment up for no distractions, and then they go. And we've seen that. I worked with my cousin um, this past spring came to me and we just did a introductory 3 month stint and he dropped 30 pounds in 3 months. And so he was focused. He followed the plan. He did the stuff. So some people just they have that. ability to kind of isolate themselves where they can accelerate the process. And sometimes we don't. We're going to have stuff that comes up. We're going to have kids' activities. We're going to have social events that we have to navigate. But that's what you use us for. So, all right, I'm done talking now. I didn't make this sexy. So let me go ahead and stop the share and see if you guys have anything, any inputs.
No, I mean it's good. It's good to talk through the phases and how do I know what phase I'm in and what constitutes foundation versus fat loss. And I think that will help kind of give the depth to a lot of people. Stephanie, since we've got you here on the call, would welcome any questions or if you're good.
I'm good. I think one thing, and I was actually going to talk to you about it today, and I appreciate hearing that. I've noticed that on my on my workout days when I'm doing my strength training, like I am very hungry, and I was going to talk to you about that too. That like I'm just like I can't get through like without snacking or something or without doing some additional calories on those days because I'm finding myself at the gym. Like yesterday, I was there for an hour and a half, and afterwards, and I did in the afternoon. And when I was done at like 3:30, there was no way I could hold out for another 3 hours before dinner.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and that's good. And so that what's so good about this, Stephanie, and I know others will appreciate this, is your metabolism is working. It is doing what it's supposed to do. And having hunger, believe it or not, is a good thing. Like, first off, we know that your body is working. You obviously worked out. You're also getting your steps in. So it is super, super normal that you are absolutely hungry, and that is your body saying, hey, girl, we need the nutrients. And those are days to really lean into that. And it is, hey, I'm probably going to plug a snack in. And then it's like, okay, what should that snack be composed of? And that's what we need to talk a little bit deeper into for you personally. And I'll pull up your macros and stuff, and we can talk about what you personally need. But for a lot of people, it is going to be like for women, let me just preface it this way, is like 10 to 15 grams of protein, and then maybe some type of fruit, carbohydrate that we can put with it. Sometimes for me personally, it is just one of the, I specifically like Sigis, the brand of yogurt. And I specifically get them just first off, I like the taste. Second, I cannot do artificial sweetener. I don't know what it is. I don't care for the taste of it. And so they actually use cane sugar because a lot of people have been like, well, I can't believe you eat that. It has so much sugar in it. And I'm like, it's legit real sugar. And so I use that a lot of times. Or if you can measure out a fourth of a cup of nuts, which I've seen on your food journal specifically, is a fourth of a cup or whatever a serving is for that nut and a piece of fruit can really get us to the next meal. And especially when you work out first thing in the morning and you get your steps in the morning, that time between getting kids from school to then dinner is like, I'm going to eat somebody's arm. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and it is something where the cool thing is your body's working. You're absolutely getting yourself in fat loss. It's just what can we do to take an edge of that hunger off to then get you to the next meal, but still keep you in fat loss. So that's the balancing act that we have on that. Good question though. Cool. Any other questions, or obviously we'll talk more in your private call.
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. Tony, any other thoughts on this? Because I know this this is it could be a deep topic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we kept it broad. I mean, we had all the pieces, and as we get more specific with each client and their process, we may move some of the pieces around or introduce certain pieces and not introduce pieces to certain clients. It depends. There's multiple ways to get there. We're trying to get there efficient. We're trying to get there with giving you the tools. that you
Yeah.
can that you can implement and utilize as simple as possible, but as efficient as possible.
Yeah, and I think this came up with somebody else earlier today is so okay, when we put people's macronutrients in and you have a calorie, you have a different protein, carbohydrate, and fat. And I know you touched on this, like, okay, if we go over one, don't get too jazzed. When do we get jazzed? At the end of the day, when you are in fat loss, the most important thing that we keep in mind, there's two, is are we in a deficit? And so knowing that you are 100% in your deficit and then knowing that you've hit your minimum on protein. So when it comes to a certain number from the calorie perspective, I don't want us to get too scared with being under. Now, with that said, we can't go too far under. And so I want to just kind of like speak into that is for some people, they have this calorie goal that they're like, this is a lot. And especially too for women, for men, actually for men too, it may be like, holy moly, that's a lot of food. And what's interesting, and so again, we're in preface that we desire to lose weight, but where I'm going with this is you may actually underconsume, 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 underconsume Monday through Thursday, let's just say. And then the weekend comes and you actually overconsume. You're balancing out nutrients, and this is where a lot of people just don't see weight loss. And so the idea is that we keep you in a tolerable deficit. For most people, we have found that to be right around 500 calorie deficit. When you add that up over 7 days, it's 3,500 calories. Therefore, you, in theory, lose 1 pound of fat. The thing that I don't want anyone to get too jazzed about is let's just say your calories are 1,800, but you keep hitting 15 or 1,600 and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm under consuming." It's okay. It's whatever your body can tolerate that you're not hangry, you're not getting a headache, you're able to keep normal functioning and that you actually feel energy, you feel good from it and you don't binge. So that's where it's like this is all going to be very specific to each person. Yes, there's some nuts and bolts of what we have to do in order to lose fat, but it's something where if you knock it out in a certain amount of time versus somebody else takes a longer amount of time, everybody's journey is a little bit different and a little more personalized. And it also comes back to what can you tolerate, what should you tolerate, and insulin response just to be completely genuine. So I know that was probably like way longer winded than it needed to be, but
Yeah, I mean, you can be under calories for multiple days, depending on how much how much that deficit is. You'll know because your body will tell you. What I'm saying there is like you'll start feeling lethargic. You won't feel well if you're pretty
yep,
heavily
work
under
out.
calories. Your workouts will suffer, your sleep will suffer. So there's indicators that you'll know if you're under calories too heavy for too many days. And that's what we try not to get a person into that frame because it's not worth that process because it does other damage. Can have more stress on the hormonal response, the thyroid, the insulin, and the metabolic process itself. And that's why there's certain parameters we want to keep you moving in the right direction safely and effectively for long-term success. But yeah, you'll notice it, and it'll push you into an overtraining component because you're not taking in enough nutrients. You will know. I've been there before, and it's not fun either. So, uh, but yeah, I mean, it's you can tolerate for a couple days, and you're not going to do you know any harm, but you go extended period of time, and a lot of people just can't tolerate it. But extended period of time will start causing some other problems. Yeah,
That's good. Well,
yeah.
we can go ahead and wrap it up unless there's any other questions or thoughts.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, and we will kick another one next week on a different topic. So everybody have an awesome day, and we'll talk with you soon.
See you later. Bye.